And what is going on, baseball fans? Hello, hello, hello. Wow. 110 people to start things off. Man, oh man, that's a good sign that everyone wants to hear about Juan Soto. I don't know if anyone's heard the news, but Juan Soto is hey, could get traded. And not huge news. What do you think, John? I mean, I don't think that's that big of news. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we don't know for sure if he's going to be traded, but they're certainly listening to offers. And I think it's likely because his value is at its peak right now. You know, if they wait past this deadline, it's only going to go down. You miss a whole postseason and the rest of this one. And then, you know, if they continue to hold on to him, go down from there. So you might as well, you know, get your big haul right now.
Absolutely. And well, yeah, this is definitely big news because you don't ever have a player like this where, you know, of this magnitude on the market. You know, the last player, I mean, Miguel Cabrera was obviously a big time player. But that was an offseason move. You had Alex Rodriguez. That was a big offseason move. You've never had, at least I can't think of anything. I mean, knowing my brain and how it works sometimes, I forget about things. Has there ever been a player of this magnitude on the trade market in season? I can't think of a time.
I can't think of one either, especially, you know, with his, you know, specific, he's 23. He's already one of the top 5 players in baseball, at least. I mean, got 2.5 years of control, and that's just insane.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's crazy. And I'm kind of getting this gut feeling. This is just my gut. I don't know. It just feels like just because there's so many things going on with the Nationals ownership, you would imagine that maybe they actually want to get this thing done as quickly as possible because, well, we'll talk about the Scott Boras comments in a little bit. He went on a podcast just recently. He kind of talked about it a little bit more. But before we do dive into everything, just want to go over today's sponsors for the show. Also, everyone, hit that like button for me. It's really going to help us with the algorithm here. So put down the T, hit the like button for me. Here we go. Today's sponsors. We got SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase. If you're looking to go to a game once baseball starts back up, then use my code HIGH. $20 off your first purchase. Don't forget, we are partners with Prize Picks as well. Use my code GINGER. If you deposit $20, they'll give you $20. So let's get to it. Juan Soto. But Scott Boras made some comments here, and I'm going to share this screen for all of you. They did talk about this in a media scrum at the All-Star game, but he went on a podcast as well. So let me just share the screen for all of you. On MLB Trade Rumors, he goes on to say here, this was with Joel Sherman and John Heyman on the New York Post podcast called The Show. There were plenty of factors in the decision of declining the contract extension of 15 years, $440 million. But Boras suggested that the average annual value, the potential sale of the franchise, and uncertainty about the team's direction all weighed heavily. And these, for me, John, these were the big comments here, where it says here, I don't think anybody wants to work for someone they don't know, Boras told Wagner. So it's kind of a ghost contract. We don't know who's going to pay it. Consequently, when you're a player like Juan, you're a winning player and you want to make sure there's a lot of things than dollars and cents involved and who you're going to work for and where you're going to be for the majority. So for me, when I'm hearing that, you know, it just sounds pretty reasonable if you ask me. You know, if I'm going for a job somewhere, you know, and I interview for a job somewhere. Me and the boss get along pretty well. They offer me the job. And then, you know, 6 months later, that boss is out of town and, you know, someone else coming in. I'm like, whoa, I came here to work for, I like this guy that was the boss here. You know, we had a good thing going. I don't know who this new person is. You know, and for someone that is on a big long-term contract and you have new ownership come in, you don't know what their plans are going to be. But there's also out there too, where Buster Olney was talking about it. And once again, I will share the screen. Buster Olney also dove into this just a little bit. Let's share the screen one more time. So he says here, executives around the game believe new owners will want the situation resolved one way or another before taking over, with an extension likely off the table. That would mean completing a trade before the sale of the team goes through. Of course, we don't know who the new owners will be, so that's speculative. So that is a speculative view of the scenario. So, John, when you hear those comments, or right off the bat, what do you think about those comments? Do you think that means a trade could happen more sooner rather than later? Or do you think maybe they will just wait until the offseason? I don't know. What are you thinking?
I think it's probably more sooner than later. Yeah. I mean, the fact that they kind of went public pretty strongly and said, hey, we're listening to offers, suggests that, it's not just, because a lot of times it's just leaked a little bit or you don't hear anything and maybe they're talking, maybe they're not. But this was like, okay, now we're listening to this was like, yeah. So let's see what we can get for him now. So I think that improves the likelihood. Having said that, I'm sure we're going to get into some of the details of the value here. It's a really tough trade to make. They're going to listen to offers, but getting the right offer is the trick, right? And winning the bid is the trick. So it's not an easy thing to do. As we talked about at the beginning, he's kind of a unicorn. He's 23 and his value, we have him on the site is 176, which is an update over the weekend. So it was in the 190s, went down a little bit just because of passage of time, but that's still an insane number, right? So, and and I heard another report, you may get to this, that they want to attach Patrick Corbin's underwater contract to it, and we have him at like minus 55 or so. And so that's going to knock it down to about, you need to therefore pony up about 120 million in prospect capital. The Nationals have a terrible farm. So, it's one of the worst in baseball. They won their championship a couple of years ago and they kind of shot their wad and now, it's pretty dead. So they want to use this opportunity to build that farm back up and maybe they're competitive again in like 2025. So like I said earlier, this is their opportunity to do that. They can get a huge haul if they trade him now. If they don't think they're going to resign him, it doesn't sound like they're going to. And if it seems like the new owners are not going to want to deal with this, then yeah, they'll trade him now. The other piece of it is if they get at least one of those underwater contracts off the books, it may help in negotiations of the new sale. Those two underwater contracts are Strasburg and Corbin. Strasburg is so deeply underwater. It's the worst contract in baseball. Yeah, I think they recognize that that's probably not movable. And so they're probably being realistic and say, let's split the difference and say, let's attach Corbin and we'll still get a haul. That seems the most reasonable path.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because there was an article that I don't remember if it was an article or just something Ken Rosenthal tweeted out, but he was saying, he said it on TV. He was saying most likely you wouldn't have Patrick Corbin in the deal because he dilutes the value. But when I was listening to that, I'm like, well, in a way you kind of almost have to, just because, there are some teams out there, they could get it done, but it sounds a little bit more reasonable to put Patrick Corbin or Strasburg, more likely Corbin, just like you said, because Strasburg is just such a low value. That is diluting it to me, Corbin. Yeah, it's diluting it a little bit, but in a more helpful way. Do you think Corbin is more likely the guy you think that you would have to put with him? Or do you think Soto could just go straight up to another team?
And we wrote this article on the site about how, it's really hard to get that much value out of just prospect capital. There's very few teams who have that. So I think it's probably more realistic. As much as we like to rag on Jim Bowden, he did a piece in The Athletic today, which mentioned that the Nationals want I'm going to quote him here, multiple major leaguers and top prospects, but also to offload the bad contract of Patrick Corbin, according to sources.
And there actually was one of the featured trades. I didn't on the site. There's always a couple of featured trades. If you go to baseballtradevalues.com, if you go to the trade board at the top, there's always going to be a couple of featured trades. And one of the featured trades here today was with the. Oh, it's not there anymore. It looks like
I just updated it.
I just updated it. Let me see if hold on, I can pull it up on the Twitter page here.
It was with the Padres, and then I just updated it to a Cardinals one that I found looked pretty interesting.
And in a way, I actually there was one player I didn't quite. This is a ridiculous trade, but in a way, it almost kind of makes some sense, So let me actually share this with you. So this was one of the featured trades today. Obviously, the main piece being Soto going to the San Diego Padres, Patrick Corbin as well, but also Josh Bell. Now, that's an interesting part of it, too. Could you – you're thinking Soto is already just enough as it is, but could you maybe entice a team, be like, all right, we'll throw in Bell here, give you a rental of Josh Bell, and that would just be another bat. And for the Padres, they would love another bat like that.
Yeah, upgrade
going back to the Nationals in this deal, and as you can see here, a lot of people on the site that they're always hard to please. And as you can see, had more down votes than up votes. But in a way, I almost didn't mind this trade. You got CJ Abrams being the biggest piece here, Mackenzie Gore being the second biggest piece, Trent Grisham, who that could be a nice little, replacement for Juan Soto, a major league ready guy for the outfield. And then the number 7 prospect, Robert Gasser. And then also the number 4 prospect, Jackson Merrill. And then also Will Myers, another bit of a, kind of almost exchanging bad contracts. What do you think about this trade, John? Did you like this trade or?
Well, yeah, I thought it was interesting enough to put up as a feature, and that's why I was interested to see how the comments went. I think one of the Padres fans know, though, that they're right up against the luxury tax limit, and so they're really having to kind of work around that. And so taking on Corbin is just going to blow through that, and that's the big question: can they blow through that? So getting rid of Myers is not going to move the needle that much financially because there's only a little bit left there.
That would help, yeah.
Yeah, and and to be clear, Soto himself is making $17 million this year, so you're taking on some money there in addition to Corbin, and you're not giving up much. So they're going to blast through the luxury tax. So a lot of knowledgeable Padres fans were like, they're not going to do that. So I got to credit them for knowing what they're talking about.
Right, absolutely. And so I think this is a good segue to where we can maybe talk about some potential teams that could really get involved. I mean, we've been seeing articles all over the place. I mean, I knew when the media would get this. Before I actually get to that, if you were to have like a hunch here, how do you think this got out? Do you think someone in ownership leaked this out? Do you think someone like analytical department, like, man, you're not going to believe this news, man. I got to tell you, where do you think this came from? I almost think it came from someone within that ownership group, because I don't know if anyone saw this story today. Or if it was yesterday, but I just read it today, where the Nationals actually, and I don't know if this is a common thing, but I had never heard of it before until today, where the Nationals did not pay for Soto's trip to the All-Star game. I didn't know that was like a thing. I just figured they would always just get flown out there, like no big deal. So I don't know. Like I heard that, I'm like, oh man. Ownership doesn't really sound very happy about the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, the owners are trying to sell the team. I think you could, I'm speculating here, but I think you can make a case that they're sort of checked out, right? Okay. We're selling the team. We don't really care. You guys figure it out. And so maybe somebody in that family leaked something. I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much, but you can see a plausible case for that. A lot of times it's planted by somebody whose interest is increased, who stands to benefit from a leak. I'm not sure that's the case here. Like sometimes it's the agent or somebody who works for the agent. Sometimes it's somebody in the front office, putting feelers out. I don't know. This one is so big though that I get the feeling it's not like, not even a leak situation. It's just so much it is what it is. He turned down the contract offer, and we're at our limit, and we're selling a team. So okay, let's see what we can get for him. I don't know that there's that much mystery around it.
Yeah. But there's also another thing before we really dig into the teams here. We were talking about Patrick Corbin and Steven Strasburg. I noticed Dave Thomas in the chat said Strasburg has a no trade clause, and Patrick Corbin has a partial no trade clause. So I could see with Corbin, like, yeah, okay, I'll approve a deal. Whatever. Yeah. I get to go to a winning team with I mean, again, I don't think Strasburg would be a part of a deal. I guess it kind of just defeats the purpose almost because it's so underwater. But if it were somehow some way to be Strasburg, would you see him maybe vetoing a deal? I don't know. Like, I guess it's just speculating at this point.
I mean, didn't he buy a house in the DC area because he just
most likely? I would imagine, he signed that deal, but all right, this is my home for the next however many years. So
so I mean that could be a factor, but keep in mind Scherzer had a no trade clause as well, and he approved the trade to the Dodgers last summer. So it happens. It happens quite frequently, actually. It's just there for leverage for the player, just so that they have a say in it.
Gives them a little protection,
Yeah, like if there's multiple choices, we're like, oh, I could go there. Okay, I like that one better. Then he'll usually work it out.
Right. And, but yeah, so I feel like in the end, it probably won't be a big deal, but let's kind of dive into some possible teams that could makes some sense. And actually, MLB Trade Rumors, they're one of the best sites out there when it comes to just pretty much any baseball news, but they actually made it easy for us. They kind of broke it down a little bit for us, and we can kind of just go kind of through this article that they put together here, kind of react to it. So let's share the screen here. Taking a look here. All right. So they made an article called Looking for a Match in a Juan Soto Trade. So they broke everything down. And also, really quick, would you agree that the most comparable trade would be probably the Miguel Cabrera trade back in 2007? That seems to be the most comparable one. What do you think?
I haven't analyzed the one that was way before when, we were doing this kind. We've only been around 3 years, but I'd have to go back and look at it and see what it. I read another piece that made that same point. So I imagine there's probably some similarities there.
Yeah. So yeah, they break it down, and you can go read this article, but I'm just going to jump to the teams here. Looking here. So they start off with teams nearing the end of a rebuild cycle. And the first one right off the bat is the Baltimore Orioles. Now, obviously, there's been some tension between the Orioles and the Nationals when it comes to building ballparks and whatnot. I would imagine just right off the bat, while the Orioles, they sound like a perfect fit on paper because they have prospects, they're almost in that competitive window. Would you feel like this might be a little too out of the question considering they are crosstown rivals and, they had all that drama with all the ballpark stuff years back? Yeah,
no, they're not going to go through all that rebuilding, all that building up of prospect capital only to trade it at this point. That just seems absurd. They're going to hold on to that prospect capital. Mike Elias knows what he's doing. He was helping. He was used.
Right.
He did that with the Astros many years ago, where he built up those prospects, built it into a winning team. He's not going to stray from that path. So that's enough.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that part. Where I feel like they have a plan going. It feels almost systematic the way they've done it out there. And I think you got a nice flashy toy on the shelf right there with Soto, but I don't think they're gonna. I think they're gonna stick to the plan. The next team they have are the Detroit Tigers. And obviously, we just mentioned they made the Miguel Cabrera trade years back with Dontre Willis. Very comparable trade. But they read off here, it's doubtful the team that made this work with Miguel Cabrera would recreate history, but it's fun to think about. I don't know. A part of me doesn't want to just write them off as doubtful. I feel like maybe they could jump into it. I don't know. What do you think about the Tigers?
They'd have to give up Green and Torkelson probably and take Corbin's contract, and they could kind of make it work. So those are their two most valuable young assets. After that, there's kind of a drop off. So if they didn't want to trade both of them, then, they're not going to be able to make that deal, and they shouldn't trade both of them because they're trying to they kind of fudge the rebuild. It's sort of half-assed, they've got a couple of pieces, but some of their pitchers are injured and and then they signed Baez at the wrong time. They're not quite there yet, and they shouldn't be giving up young assets for one player. It's not a right fit.
Yeah. I mean, the one advantage they do have is Riley Green, like they mentioned in this article, where he already just closes the gap so much with just him. So you could just have, him be the main piece of the deal. But I feel like they probably realize we maybe got a little too ahead of ourselves. We're not quite there yet. Let's kind of hold off on this for now. Another interesting team could be the Chicago Cubs. They did make a couple of deals this past offseason, kind of like the Tigers. The Cubs never really went through a rebuild, really, like the Tigers. They kind of almost went through a bit of a mini rebuild. I find the Cubs to be interesting, but I almost find them almost less likely than maybe less likely than the Tigers to make a deal, because I feel like the Tigers, they have more prospect capital than the Cubs at this point. I feel like the Cubs, if they made a deal for Soto, I mean, then you're pretty much, that farm is just gone at that point.
They'd have to wipe out the top 5 or 7 guys basically, to make that deal, even with taking Corbin's contract. They could, on paper, they could do it, but why would you? You've just, again, you started to rebuild and build up some prospect capital. It's not quite there yet, but you just wipe that out for 2.5 years or so. I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, they do have they do have the big market. It just doesn't sound like it's really too in the cards. I mean, it'd be great to see Soto at Wrigley. That would be fantastic. But yeah, I agree. I would say out of these 3 teams, probably if there was a team to pick from, I would say the Tigers would be the most likely out of these 3. teams nearing the end of a rebuild, but I would probably say no on all three of those teams. So let's move on to what they say, payroll conscious long shots. Now, I've actually seen a lot of people, because I did a video a few days ago reviewing trade offers from The Athletic, from all the different writers. Oh my God. I love to just rant about this. There was one trade on there from the Yankees, the guy who was writing for the Yankees. I'm not going to get into it. I'll wait till we get to the Yankees on here, but it was so bad, John. I'm like thinking, what? This is worse than Jim Bowden. This is awful. Like, what is this guy thinking? I don't know if you read the article, but that was so bad. I'm like, man. Anyway, we'll get to
this is my usual sort of rant that journalists generally don't understand trade value. They don't do the math. I love the fact that, guys like, Jeff Passett and Ken Rosenthal, who have been acknowledging our site, they basically say, hey, these guys do the math. So, much like the team's front offices do. So a lot of journalists, though, they try to sort of gut it out, and it's not quite there. And by the way, there's a new Jim Bowden piece in The Athletic today, so lots of
you mentioned that earlier. I gotta get to work on that one. That's Jim Bowden.
He'll enjoy that.
He knows I'm out here. I'm just waiting for him to write his articles. He knows I'm out there. I know you hear me, Jim. But let's get to the Rays and the Guardians. I've actually seen a lot of people mention the Guardians in my comments, and but I'm just thinking, they're not going to spend the money. If they weren't going to give the money, they did pay Jose Ramirez, granted a discount. But they didn't want to pay Lindor. I don't see the Guardians doing it, and the Rays, that would be an absolute nightmare. But it's funny with the Rays, they could probably just unload prospects and they would just be fine anyway. And we'll have Soto for the next 2.5 years. That's fine. Whatever. We got enough prospects. We just get rid of all these guys. We're good to go. And we'll just rebuild over the next 2 years. But having Juan Soto in Tampa, my God, kill me. But I'm guessing you're agreeing about this one too with the Rays and the Guardians.
It would eat up a big chunk of their farm, and the Rays are not going to pay the money for Corbin and even Soto's salary.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
And the Guardians are not going to either. And I know they have a roster crunch coming, and they do need to trade some prospects, as we've discussed before. But they're not like, Espino, we have him at 52. And then after that, it's just guys in the 20s and teens. It's like not quite enough. You'd have to piece together 6 or 7 of those guys to make it work. And they're not going to do that. That wipes them out.
The only thing I could see maybe of the Rays giving them going from like a 0% chance to a 1% chance would be the fact that they, new ballpark, possibly sometime, maybe they're like, all right, Juan Soto, that's going to be the guy, new stadium. This is going to be the guy that puts butts in the seats. But I don't see him doing that. That's the only way I could even see him even considering it. But
no, it's just not their MO.
No, I don't see it at all. But let's move a little further down. We got the Diamondbacks. I actually, the Diamondbacks would just be that really, really weird team that could maybe get on it, but I don't see it. Kind of like the Orioles, where they got a ton of prospects, but I feel like they're probably sticking to the path that they're on. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going to veer from this path. I mean, they're, they would probably have to include Corbin Carroll in that, who we have at like 72 as the lead piece. Yeah. Jordan Lawler's at 45. So they could make it work and still have a few guys left over because they've got a pretty rich farm. Or they could they're not going to piece together the guys in the teens. That's too far off. So, I just don't see it being their thing either. It's just not the right team for them.
Would be cool. And I'll be honest, that'd be like just the fan in me, the radio talk fan in me. That'd just be boring. God, Soto on the Diamondbacks? Like, oh, come on.
Yeah,
that's just not fun. We want to see the Dodgers getting on it. But let's move on to the next one here. We got the Twins. I mean, the only reason the Twins would even be somewhat of a consideration to me, just because they showed signs of being willing to spend, obviously, with Carlos Correa. But that was such a different contract, though. Like, they put the opt-outs in there. And it's only a 3-year deal. So it's not like they were making a huge commitment, to someone long-term. To me, there's a 0% chance of the Twins to do it. What do you think?
No, their farm is really bad, actually.
Yeah.
Austin Martin used to, he was the lead piece they got in the Barrios trade last year. He is just, his stock has just dropped like an anchor. He's having a terrible time. And so there's really not much to deal with, frankly. Yeah. I mean, they could probably take on Corbin. They could probably pay Soto, but they don't have the prospects right now. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Moving on here, we have, let's see what the next team is. Well, the Rockies. I don't see the Rockies doing this. There's no way. They don't have the prospects, but would be quite the Rockies move. Right, you don't know what the heck these guys are doing over there. You don't know what's going on with them, but yeah, I would imagine
they'll be like, "Hey, let's get in this mix."
Yeah. I think the world would absolutely explode if the Rockies somehow, but they can't because they don't have the prospects. Who is their highest value player at the moment? I'm trying to think. It's probably Rogers, right? Maybe Brennan Rogers.
Of the major league side. Now, I will say their farm is getting a little bit better. They've been getting some love from Baseball America and a few others. So Ezekiel Tovar has really kind of shot up. He's got some healing. Got Zach Veen, Drew Romo, a couple other guys.
That's right. Yeah, Veen.
Yeah. So, but again, it would wipe out the top, 5 or 7 guys in their farm. And that seems like a dumb idea, but it is the Rockies.
It is the Rockies. Hey, Tovar, Veen, Romo.
Yep.
Just, maybe throw in like 5 more guys and you got a done deal. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But let's move on here. Let's keep moving on down this list. So now we're getting into the best fits. Okay. Yep. So we did mention the trade earlier, one of the featured trades with the Padres. Now, I do think the Padres, the one thing with the Padres, like that I just keep thinking about, yes, they have the trade there, but that's their farm. It's gone at that point. Like it is, they have wood, but that's it. Like you pretty much start from scratch at that point. And that's like the one thing. And then you mentioned earlier with the luxury tax, they definitely make some sense because they obviously have the pieces. And I don't know. What are if you were to give a % chance on the Padres, what are you thinking?
20.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you can never count out AJ Preller. Obviously, he's a wild card, and it's a little unpredictable. But if you think about it, he can afford to lose Gore because he's okay on starting pitching. He's got Darvish and Musgrove and Snell, and he's okay there. He could afford to lose Abrams because he's got Tatis coming back. And then Hassel, okay. Like if he wants to go for it now, he could dip into the farm a little deeper for a Hassel and a Wood and try to make it happen. But then again, so the luxury tax thing is really the barrier. It depends on if they really want to go over that. It sounds like they don't. But again, maybe he sweet talks the owner into it. I don't know. It could. It's a little bit.
And he's had a way of, we've seen some trades in the past. We had the Yu Darvish trade where, he got based on the values at the time. Maybe the Cubs valued some of those prospects a little higher. But, he has gotten away with some stuff in the past. And I'm not mentioning the one that got him into trouble, but we've seen a couple where he's really kind of gotten the win in terms of value on paper at the time.
Except that, oh my God, that Nola trade, he gave up Ty France and Munoz. That was ridiculous.
Yeah. That's just, oh my goodness. I forgot about that. Well, let's move on here. The Dodgers. Now, so I saw someone in the chat say, I don't remember who said it in the chat, but they said they disagreed with me excluding the Dodgers. So the reason I'm hesitant about the Dodgers is just because, and again, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, because maybe I'm thinking about it a little bit wrong. I'm thinking about where the Nationals would, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what package will the Nationals want the most.
Yeah.
What's their favorite package from the pickings? And the biggest piece that the Dodgers can offer is Cartaya, and they have Kyber Ruiz. So, I guess you could always just move guys off of positions and whatever, but Cartaya, he's a little further away, but you have a young catcher for the future. And you never know how these guys will pan out, but I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think that is really a big deal in the grand scheme of things, or?
I'm going to hesitate and say yes and no. I mean, when the A's traded Matt Olson, they got a catcher back as the lead piece, Shea Langoliers, even though they already had Murphy there, who was under control for 4 years. So,
yeah.
And so then you figure, okay, they're probably going to trade Murphy at some point, maybe this offseason, and then bring up Langoliers, and then just sort of work the system that way, cycle guys through. Ruiz is already there. Cartaya is a little bit farther away, so maybe they bring him on and see how it goes. But then they could always trade him, flip him a year from now for a different package that makes more sense position wise. So that at least they get the value here. So it's not out of the question. It's a little bit unorthodox, but it's certainly happened before. But you could piece together, something with, Bobby Miller and Michael Bush and Vargas and Pahis. I mean, that does take a big hit out of the Dodgers farm because those guys are sort of in the 20s, but you could piece it together if the Dodgers really wanted to do that. I don't know that they do because they seem all about sustainability and next guy up. But,
right.
We've talked about this before. They're so good at developing prospects, guys, just in terms of our values that start off in the single digits and then a year later they're in the teens and a year later and then they're in the 20s. Like that shows you that they're developing them into really nice prospects. And so they can just keep doing that. So maybe they can afford it.
Yeah. But yeah, for the Dodgers, they're always dangerous. Always. They can always go pull off a deal. Another part of me that also maybe thinks otherwise, because it feels like they have been giving up some prospects in the last couple of years. Obviously, a lot last year with Scherzer and Trey Turner. So will they want to do it again for a second straight year? But like you said, though, very good at developing prospects. So, sure, it might hurt to give up, quite the package of, someone like Cartaya and Pajes and Michael Bush and, whatever, but they can keep on churning it through. Before I do move on to the next team on this list, we had a few super chats come in. U.S. Veteran, he has just been awesome with the support lately. Thank you, U.S. Veteran, with the $10 super chat. He is suggesting 15 years, $44 million per year, $660 million for Juan Soto. So I think that might be a little too much, but what do you think would be an appropriate deal? Because obviously 440 is not enough over 15. Scott Boras said one of the reasons, is obviously AAV. I also wonder too if maybe they're looking at it because a lot of it could be backloaded. I'm wondering about that or speculating about that. So maybe they
mentioned that. I think Soto himself even might have said something about that.
Oh, did he? I didn't even notice that. But
I think it wasn't deferred, but it was backloaded.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because Harper, I think that was one of the reasons with Harper too. I think Harper mentioned that in a podcast where he said, a lot of it was going to be like backloaded. And so maybe the Nationals are doing that. So, but also AAV doesn't seem to be enough. So what is 440 divided by 15? That's 29 a year. So I'm thinking, I don't know. What do you think Boras might be looking for here?
So, he said pretty obviously that he's looking for, top of the market AAV commensurate with Soto's talent. Keep in mind, Soto is 23 and we haven't even seen his peak years yet. His peak years are going to be like 26, 27, 28. And, so he's going to get even better if you follow aging curve patterns and trust those. And then eventually he'll decline when he's into his late 30s and everything. But so you bake all that in. If you want to assume it's a 15-year deal, as this gentleman says, and you think, okay, well, it's going to have to be top of the market. Now, keep in mind, you have to sort of look at it from a number of different perspectives. Risk is part of it. Like you have to build in some, some risk that you're tying up budget for that long a period. So if something goes south, like the Strasburg deal did, then you're stuck with it. And so that's why teams always kind of go a little bit under what you might think. You can't just do $1 per WAR and work it out. You have to bake in some of that risk. There's injury risk and there's contract risk. And so one of the ways they do that is to just extend it and give a lower AAV. So at a 15-year contract, that's going to have some of that in it. Right. So it's not necessarily going to be like $40 million a year. It's going to be more like $35 million a year. That's what, if you think about the Mike Trout contract, obviously he was worth like 70, 80 million a year. The numbers he was putting up were ridiculous. But they couldn't offer that because that would kill the budget. Right. So what they did was they offered him like 36 million a year and then just spread it out. So So that's kind of the deal with Soto as well. Now, the other thing is it's not quite comparable to Tatis or Franco, where they're sort of earlier in their careers. And so they will take money now. They're leaving some money on the table because they are so far away from free agency. Soto and Boris already kind of smell the light at the end of the tunnel. And so they're thinking retail, not wholesale. They're thinking we want top market value. So yeah, it's going to be a big number. It's probably going to be at least in the 35 range. So whatever 35 times 15, that's probably the baseline. That gets you pretty close. Similar to the Trout extension, somewhere in there, whatever that number is.
Yeah, I'm thinking, to me, I would imagine it's going to be anywhere, I could maybe even see 35 per year. If it was a 35 over, no, that's not going to, no, that wouldn't work.
So 35 times 15 is 525. That seems like, I know they want to hit the 5 number.
Yeah.
That seems pretty clear. So that would get you there. We'll get you 525.
So I would imagine, you wouldn't be able to break Trout's AAV, but remember that was over 12.
Right.
So to me, it would have to be like 34. If it was 34 over 15, that's 510.
Yeah. So we're in that ballpark. Yeah. And they typically go lately. They've been going like Lindor's contract, and I think it was Tatis's contract. They're going to like age 38. So that's kind of becoming the new standard for some reason. Obviously, nobody wants to be paying Miguel Cabrera when he's 40 or whatever. So that's partly why.
Yeah, my guess his AAV is probably going to be 33. 33 over 15 would be 495. So I'm guessing he's probably shooting for 34, maybe 15, 510.
Yeah.
If they want to hit that 5, maybe they 480 at minimum. I would think like 475 or so.
Yeah.
That's enough of a gap to turn it down. So. We're going to have to wait and see what ends up happening. I would imagine 44 over 15 for each year. I think 6.
Yeah, that's too
much. I think he's getting that from because Scherzer's making 43. So probably thinking, okay, let's break Scherzer's and then.
But that's a short-term deal,
right? But that's a short-term deal. So I think that's where where that came from. But like Trout would be the most comparable at this point.
Yeah.
I think you guys got it. I think you got to be thinking at least 475, 500 in that range. So we'll see what they end up getting. But we had a couple more super chats here. Let me just get to them rather quick. U.S. veteran, thank you so much again. I wish StreamYard did a better job at filtering out the super chats. Here we go. From Matthew. My boy Hogwatch is on the chat. I think that's Padres channel, right? Padres make the most sense. How different you guys think the Padres are with Soto? I mean, let's say you send back Grisham, you get rid of Myers, you have no Abrams, you're losing Gore, who's one of your better pitchers this year. Do you think ultimately, the Padres are probably thinking this too? Obviously, every team would be thinking this, but does he make our team better in the grand scheme of things, for this year? We're giving up pieces. We're adding him. Are we closer to our goal getting Juan Soto, with the subtraction of these other guys? What do you think, John?
So, all right. So let's do a little bit of math here.
A little bit of math.
Let's say, we're half-ish way through the season and he's going to give you like a 7-8 WAR. So let's round it up. Let's say he's going to give you 4 WAR for the rest of the year. Well, maybe not, but you're also getting, if you make the playoffs, you're getting him in October and you don't have to pay him for that. That's basically a free month of his services. So throw another million or another WAR on there. So you're basically getting 4 or 5 WAR for the rest of the year for Soto. If you take away Grisham, you're not getting much of anything. He's basically a replacement level this year. Abrams is young and hasn't quite found his stride yet. You're not getting much there. Gore, you're getting a little bit. So you've already got like a difference of about 6 or 7 wins there, just with those guys. And then, the prospects are obviously prospects, so they're not going to contribute to this year. So if you throw in a Merrill or a Wood or whatever to complete the deal, you're getting a lift of about 6 or 7 wins just this year, plus next year and the year after that as well.
Yeah, because when you're looking at the numbers on Fangraphs, let me just share the screen for Fangraphs here. Here we go. So if we're looking at the numbers, we're seeing here Grisham is at a 0.6. Myers is at a 0.1.
Yeah.
And then for the pitching, Gore is at 1 win. So you're looking at, 1.7.
Yeah.
And then Soto, as of right now, and he's been heating up lately too.
He does this. He usually starts slow and then goes on a tear in the second half.
So Soto's at a 2.6. So right now he'd be offering, he would have given you one more win. But he has been like,
look at his rest of season projections.
Yeah. And then for some reason they're only saying, or is this the rest of the season? I think this is
go down a little bit.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they're saying it's only 3.2. I think this is where it should be. I'm confused.
Yeah, that's about right.
For the whole year?
No. From this point on, he's going to give you 3.2 is what they're saying.
I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah. Okay. So,
and then I'm saying throw another one in there for October because that's basically a free month. So you're looking at 4-ish from here, whereas you're looking at maybe 1 from the other guys.
Yeah. So in the end, Soto and what they have really needed is a bat, and that's been like something drastically missing from that lineup. And then who knows? Maybe they can bring Corbin over, and maybe they can get something going with him, and maybe you can get similar production to Mackenzie Gore, maybe a little bit, but the Padres. I think at the end of the day, the only things holding them back are the luxury tax. And then are they willing to just get rid of the last good pieces of their farm? So well, I see a lot of Padres fans I feel like are split, where they say like, no, probably they won't do that. Or there's Padres fans out there. I think I saw a couple in the chat saying, go for it. Like, this is it. Like, go for it. So I think there's a bit of a split there among Padres fans. But getting on to really quick, the next super chat. We had one from Adrian Gomez Ortega. What do you think of a mega trade? Once again, Padres. Soto and some bad contracts. Josh Bell. Just funny. We actually just
did that one. Yeah.
But he mentions here Hosmer. So maybe I feel like no, Hosmer would be diluting it more. Yeah. So Hosmer wouldn't work, I think.
He's probably thinking that because Josh Bell would be coming in to replace Hosmer. So then you got to get rid of Hosmer, right? But then the problem is, how do you dump Hosmer?
Yeah, so that's another key sticking point. I didn't think about that. That's another. I don't know why I always forget about Hosmer with the Padres, but I don't know. But that would definitely be a sticking point. Adrian, thank you. Moving on here, I think we had one more before we really dive into the rest here. From U.S. Veteran, one more time. Wouldn't a team trading for Juan Soto want to know what he wants contract-wise before trading for him? I think that's absolutely a big thing. And we're going to get into it for the rest of this article. Teams that would be willing to give him no team, I think, is going to trade for him if they're like we're talking about the Rays and the Guardians. I don't think they're going to trade for him just because they wouldn't be able to sign him long term. Could you see a team trading for him without having an extension in mind? Like to me, I would think that sounds a little.
Okay, so I'm going to look at this first from a strict valuation perspective. Mm-hmm. In that world, in my world of crunching numbers, it doesn't make a difference because it's too uncertain and he's too far away. Having said that, I know it's a factor in real life. So, but and the other thing is he doesn't have control of where he's traded. He's still an arbitration guy. He doesn't have a no trade clause. He can't pick the team he's going to. So therefore it's up to the acquiring team to figure out, is 2.5 years of him and I don't sign him still worth the package, or is it 2.5 plus? But that plus is going to be retail, like I talked about earlier. We just talked about it. You're going to have to give him 500. There's no surplus value attached to that because you're going to be paying high market value at that point. So it's not going to add anything to his price, in other words, because that's the zero surplus, right? So then it just becomes a question of, can you afford it, and does it make sense for you? That's the other sort of piece of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's going to be definitely interesting when that happens. U.S. Veteran, thank you for the $10. Another quick one here. Sergio, are Gore and C.J. Abrams still considered prospects? I don't think so at this point. I know Gore is not. Abrams might be like fringe, I guess.
No. In our model, they're not. And
no, I would have, because he's already seen like enough now. So
yeah. I mean, we start our clock at like 10% of MLB service time, basically. Once they get through, and once they're sort of playing enough, then we sort of move them on to a different category.
Right.
But others have slightly different clocks. So, but I don't think so.
Yeah. And then one more before we move on to the article here. Robbie, I can't see Soto signing a 15-year contract due to inflation. He'd be better off signing a shorter term, higher AAV until he's 30 and then sign another mega deal after that. I mean, hey, got a bit of a point, with the market the way it is. Who knows what's going to happen with this, just the economy and everything. And,
Yeah, I mean, look, Judge is 30, and there's talk of him signing a mega contract. Now he's Judge, and maybe he gets away with it because he's having a fantastic season. But those tend to happen less and less these days, except for those real superstars,
right?
So you don't really know what the market's going to be. What is he, 23? So 7 years from now. By that point, we might have even less of an interest in signing guys who are in their 30s because the market has really been skewing younger.
Yeah.
So like he's taking a risk if he does that because you just don't know if you're going to get the same kind of money at that point 7 years from now.
And that's where Boris is. That's why Boris is there. That's why he has an idea of what's going on. And so but then again, could he maybe be looking for a shorter deal? Who knows?
I mean, if you do that, you're going to get a higher AAV because it's a shorter term contract. It's less risk to the team because you only got him for 6 or 7 years. And again, if something goes south, then it's not as big of a hit. So that's gonna raise it. So you could see him getting like a 40 million AAV for 7 years. That's 280. But it kind of feels like and then maybe you piece together the other 220 after when you start to think about it that way, we're breaking it up into two halves. I don't know. There's more risk in that second half. You might as well lock it in now.
Right. And then really quick, I do just want to pull up this comment from Logan here. Just want to pull this up here. I feel like your models don't capture the value of diversifying your investments. There's more risk with one player than a theatrical package of 6 players, and risk should increase your return. I just think at the end of the day, each player, they have their value. I don't know. What do you think about this, John?
I see his point. It typically I think with prospects, that's where you see that because you don't know if a prospect is going to hit or not. You can have the higher rated ones have a higher probability of hitting, but you still don't know for sure. We've seen some high value guys bust. So you definitely want to diversify your package. If you're the Nationals, for example, you don't want to just, concentrate it on one high value guy. You want a few guys to spread your risk around. That's part one of that.
Usually that's what we see in trades. You see if it takes a few guys, it tends up being different levels of value. And
sometimes the second guy ends up being the winner, not the first one.
Right. We've talked about this too, where usually an is going to give up one prospect for one player. Like that's usually not what happens. So that's why usually these teams, they hug their prospects like you've mentioned before. I think there's definitely a point there. But
there's one other sort of aspect to this, which is, concentrating the value on one guy. And I'm going to go back to Mike Trout. Again, he's on paper, he was worth, at the time of his peak when his extension happened, about 80 million. If you just did dollars per WAR and you worked it out, and that's ridiculous. No one's going to concentrate that much money in one player because it hamstrings their budget, Even if you're the Mets, it's just so hard to like build a team of 24 other guys with one guy making that much money. So that tamps down the money that you can pay a guy, which is why you have to flatten that out over time. And so that gets you your diversification that way.
Yeah.
If I understand his question, I think that would answer it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but all right, let's move on here. Back to the article. We only have a few more teams here to go through. Let's get back to it here. Okay. So we were talking about the Dodgers. At the end of the day, I think the Dodgers are always a dangerous team, but it will come down to will the Nationals be okay with taking on another top catching prospect? Here we go. This is where we can talk the Yankees. And the Yankees, it's so interesting. If George Steinbrenner were here, this deal is getting done. You got Juan Soto in a New York Yankee uniform if George Steinbrenner's there. He's already there in New York. Steinbrenner's kicking down doors, and he'll call them himself and do the deal. Different times now in New York. And with the Yankees, it's actually, I wouldn't say it's as much. I think people think, oh, Yankees. Oh, yeah, that's done. But when you really look at it, they might not have a strong enough package as some of these other teams. What do you think about the prospects of that the Yankees have to offer?
I'm just going to make a comment that a lot of Yankees fans overvalue their prospects, as we know. I mean, sometimes you'll see something on Twitter like, okay, Andujar, Hicks, and Gallo for Soto. Who says no? I'm like, yeah, okay.
Right.
But like, Wisniewski and Florial, so
yeah,
no. So you're going to have to include Volpe, who we have at 52.6. Now, Peraza is also a shortstop. He's not having a great year. He's down to 20. Maybe you don't throw him in because that's two shortstops. So then you get, Volpe at 52. Then you're down to Pereira at 16. Now you're at 68, 69. Jason Dominguez is not even a top 100 prospect in the sources that we follow, and he's around 15. So you're at 75, and it dwindles down from there. So they just don't seem to have the prospects. And then you're dipping into like Gleyber Torres or whoever from the major league team, but that hurts your major league team. And I don't think the Nationals would want him anyway because he doesn't fit their timeline. So like, what else you got? So then you're going to have to take on more money. You could say, okay, we'll take on Strasburg's contract.
That's what I was just thinking. You'd have to take
That's the only way to make that work.
That's the only way it would work. Even with Corbin, you're still so far. They would have to take Strasburg, and then he would have to approve a deal.
Yeah.
There's too many roadblocks here for the Yankees, but I need to mention this because this just drove me absolutely insane the other day. Oh my goodness, on The Athletic. Please, Mark Carrick suggested this trade. Gleyber Torres, Oswald Peraza, Jason Dominguez. How the heck do you not even mention Anthony Volpe, my friend? What the heck is going on over here?
Yeah.
My goodness. Once they start using baseball trade values, they just got to learn. They just got to learn, John. Once they just start getting on the website, practicing a little bit, because I'll be honest, I know I pick fun at some of these guys, but I was the same way. When I first found baseball trade values, I'm thinking, well, first off, I was like, what is going on over here? Like, I don't know what all this is, but it actually surprised me. And when I just started looking at these numbers, and then once I kind of thought about it more, I'm like, oh, you know what? This actually does make sense, So I think people, they hear names, so he's probably thinking, oh, Jason Dominguez, that's the next Mike Trout, that's the Martian. Right. So but he's not really fully aware of how little he's done in the minor leagues where his value has fallen. And his value could absolutely jump by like $50 million at some point. Who knows? But we'll have to wait and see. But
yeah, I mean, somebody on Twitter shared a list of the top 10 prospects from the Yankees from like 2017. And it was like Gleyber Torres and a bunch of guys who've busted 9 busts out of the 10. So like, they're not, all great. They're not all going to make it. And so they're not as highly valued as you think they are. Even Volpe's not having the year people thought he was. Yeah. He still looks pretty good, but he's not like a superstar kind of year like you would expect, So like, come on, people, let's get real. Let's look at what's actually going on there. Try to follow some people who know what they're talking about and see what you've really got to work with, because it's probably not what you think.
And just to point out to everyone here on baseballtradevalues.com, let me just share my screen. There is a part of this site where it explains how major leaguers are valued through their model, where it's simply field value minus salary equals surplus. So how is the field value calculated? Where you're using wins above replacement, you're using projections, inflation, years of control, injury risk, roster risk, and then you take away their salary, and then you get the surplus value.
Yeah.
So it's not just like these numbers are just randomly, being put together. They're not being pulled out of a hat. There's number crunching going on, and then maybe there's always room for debate on maybe certain numbers at certain points, but what I don't think a lot of people realize, and sometimes I even skip over this, even to this day, where you have a range. Because everyone looks at that median value, right? But you have the high and the low. So that's where the conversation can be expanded on.
Absolutely. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's actually the real, because there's always sort of variance in everything, right?
Right.
We're sort of splitting the difference. We're generalizing amongst the market. We're not doing it specific by team. So the Yankees or the Padres might have they might pay different amounts, but they're going to be in that range is what we're saying. It's a bell curve. So we're using that median number. It's just at the midpoint of the range because human beings like one number. Let's face it. It's simple. It's easier to make the tool work and so on. But in fact, there is a range.
Right.
So,
and what I'm talking about here, just visually for everyone, I'm on the Rockies prospects. I'll pull up the Nationals and you'll see Soto here. So Soto, that's not Soto, that's Strasburg. Soto, you could go as low as 141, and then you can go as high as 212. But the middle point is 176.8. So everyone sees the yellow bar right here, and then obviously when you plug them in, it obviously gives the median. But there is that room for error there where you can have that conversation. And but you're right. Most people, we just like to look at that one number. We just like to be told what the answer is, and so on. So every team has different philosophies. Every team values players differently. This isn't the end all be all. And I know 531 of you are listening in this chat right now, so I hope you're hearing all that.
Yeah, but, and I will say, the general fan doesn't really understand this or appreciate it. They think about, it's a good player, so I want a good player back. They're not thinking about years of control. They're not thinking about salary. But a GM is, and that's what we're trying to model.
Right. They're looking at it from a completely different point of view. The Nolan Arenado one was all you needed to hear. Like that was all you needed to see the difference between business and fandom. Like that was all you needed to know. Everyone was screaming from the hilltops about giving the Cardinals $50 million. I had never seen so many people jump on that one thing, but they didn't really understand that it was like being underwater on a car, like on a car loan. The same thing. So
no, he's overpaid basically, and so they had to make up the difference. That's all that was.
But let's move on here. So we agree. Probably the Yankees, obviously, they always make some sense when it comes to maybe fit-wise, especially for someone the caliber of a Juan Soto. But they might not quite be there in terms of being able to pull off a trade. Let's go to the Texas Rangers. I've actually been hearing some other people on my channel saying the Rangers could be the front runners. I don't know. I mean, I think they're being rumored as a team. I don't know. I haven't really fully looked at the Rangers. Like, I feel like they don't quite have enough to get this done.
Well, all right. So they have a really deep farm, but it's not a top heavy farm.
Yes.
They got Young and Leiter and then a bunch of guys you never heard of, but that are starting to creep up in value. So they could, this is a 10 dimes for a dollar kind of thing where you don't have to put a lot of them in. They could do it because they made their statement also by signing Seager and Semien and saying, hey, we want to go for it. Even though it's not quite working out this year, they're probably a year ahead or so, but they do want to turn the corner. And so maybe getting Soto, they could probably afford to extend Soto. So that question's probably answered because they got a lot of money. So that's not really an issue for them. So then the question becomes, okay, can they piece together a deal? Can they take on the Corbin contract so they can get around $120 million? They'd have to put in Young and Leiter and Evan Carter, and then pretty much the top guys in their farm. They could you could squint and you could just see it. But it also is another one of those cases where, like, why? Because you just spent a whole bunch of years rebuilding and you're counting on these guys to come in. And why would you do that?
Yeah. So you're like barely, and then you have to give up Leiter here. I mean, but I don't think they're going to do that because you just drafted Kumar Rocker. Also, got to say, is Kumar Rocker in here yet? I know it's just
we don't put him in until they can't be traded until after the World Series. So we've got some time. Well,
okay.
So we got to do our little due diligence and figure out what they're worth, and then we've got some time for that in like September.
Quick estimate, I would probably think Rocker is probably in the 20 to maybe 25 range.
So they went underslot for him. So he's not as actually highly valued as some of the sources, say, he was an underslot so they could go overslot on some of the guys after that. Yeah. It was a weird sort of deal where they already sort of pre-made it, and it was reported like, oh, we already signed. That's because they made the deal ahead of time, I think.
Right. Well, all righty. So I think we can agree that the Rangers might not be the best fit. Let's get to the next team on this list. Here we go. I believe it was the Toronto Blue Jays up next. The Toronto Blue Jays fans, they want Juan Soto more than anything. And I feel like kind of like the same thing I was mentioning earlier with the Dodgers. Big prospect that they can have a part of this deal would be Gabriel Moreno, catching prospect. Yeah, I don't know. That might be a similar thing going on here. They could get a deal done. But what do you think about the Blue Jays?
I know they're very right-handed heavy, and Soto's a lefty, so it would definitely help in that regard. But I'm not sure. I mean, they've got Springer and Teoscar and Gurriel's having a decent year, and we got Kirk at DH and a couple other catchers. And I don't know if they need him. I don't know if that's their biggest need.
It sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, and and then to make a deal happen, you'd have to give up Moreno, obviously, and Tiedemann and Gross Hens and whoever else. So again, you're wiping out the top of your farm. And I know you want to go for it, but they're sort of right on that line of, do we go for it and like wipe it out?
It's not like going for it. Like Scherzer last year was like 20-25 million or so.
Yeah.
Like that's a go for it move where it's like, you can give up, one or, a couple prospects. Yeah. So sure. But like, this is completely different. Like, this is not the same. This is wiping out a farm.
And by the way, some people still think Nate Pearson has much of it. He doesn't. He's injured. He's a reliever from here on. He's in the single digits at this point, so he's not going to move the needle.
Yeah, he could be like a throw-in at this point, but he's not going to be the centerpiece of a deal. Let's move on. Let's keep going down. We got the Mets. I'm already going to say no on this one. We have talked before about trading in division. Now, I wonder, we discussed where you said, probably not that big of a deal. I don't know. What do you think about this one, though? Do you feel like the Nationals and the Mets would come together in division on a trade for a guy like Juan Soto? Do you think that is a little different in this situation? Or do you think at the end of the day, if the package is right, why not?
I lean towards the latter. I think if the package is right, because they're in different cycles. Mets are in win now.
Right.
And so you can actually get a benefit of that by hurting the future of the Mets by taking all their prospects. And so a couple of years from now, if you're the Nationals, when you're good, they've got no one to supplant the aging guys when they would fall away. So in effect, it's kind of a chess move, but it makes some sense to do it. Now, here again, you have the problem of their top prospect is a catcher. So, but we talked about that. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. The Mets, obviously, their big advantage is they can take money. So Corbin, no problem. Strasburg, probably Cohen said, if it means we don't have to give up much. Yeah. So, it's kind of like the Yankees situation. Like the Mets don't want to give up prospects because they're trying to build a sustainable model and they've only got a few of any value at the top. So they don't want to trade those guys. They would much rather spend Steve Cohen's money. They'd much rather take on the Strasburg contract and give up a little bit. But I don't know if the Nationals are going to go for that because, like I said earlier, they're going to want to restock their farm. So they're going to want to say, okay, take Corbin and we'll take Alvarez and Beatty and Ramirez or whatever. So you can make it work, but it's going to kill the Mets top of the farm.
Right. I personally just don't see it. At the end of the day, they could get it done, but the Mets, they've done so much work to get this farm to be where it is at this point in time. So I just feel like the Mets probably not. I could see them going after someone at the deadline, but probably not Juan Soto, I would imagine.
But interesting side point, there was some odds maker who said the Mets are the favorite to land him.
Really?
And I'm not sure why. Yeah.
I would feel like for this situation that those odds can just change at any point in time. We just saw it with the draft the other day. Brooks Lee going into Sunday was the odds-on favorite to be the number one pick. And then about a couple hours before it shifted to Jackson Holiday. So I feel like this is so fluid to where in a matter of hours, things could change. One phone call could change everything. So it is interesting though. You got the Mets. I would probably think just because it's Steve Cohen, he has that sort of that money leverage, but moving on down the list, this is an interesting one. And maybe we got a bit of a taste of Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez together in the same lineup from the Home Run Derby, the finalists. Man, Julio Rodriguez, I feel like I remember Josh Hamilton years back did not win the Home Run Derby, but Justin Morneau did, but everyone was talking about Josh Hamilton at Yankee Stadium. This was like almost the same situation. Julio Rodriguez was going crazy in that. He had like, I think he had 30 home runs in each round getting up to the finals. So, but no one was talking about Julio Rodriguez. Everyone's talking about Soto because, well, now he's the big trade piece. But I wonder if Soto was the big trade piece or was not a big trade piece right now. People would still be talking about Julio Rodriguez. I digress. But the Mariners, very interesting because this is one of those teams where they could give up some prospects, but their farm, while it would take a bit of a dent, I don't think it would be in shambles, whereas some of these other teams, hey, with the Mariners, they have been on the record saying, hey, whenever we make trades, we're looking for now and the future. Well, here you go. This could be possibly a future move for the Seattle Mariners. I find them intriguing. What do you think?
It's a bit of a stretch for mine. Just looking at the numbers, assuming they're not going to trade Julio, why would you do that? So then you're looking at trading Marte, whose stock has dropped, and we have him down at like 40. He's having a bad year. Kirby, who's, not quite established yet. So he's another, I think we're at 40. So he's 88. And then you're looking at, okay, what else? Then it kind of goes down from there. So you're just struggling now to make the numbers. Kellenic, maybe you can make a throw in. He's now down to 22 because obviously he struggled. So now you're at like 120 and you take on Corbin's contract. Yeah, you could do that. So you gave up Kirby, Kellenic, and Marte, kind of three, Kirby you were probably hoping for as kind of a rock in your rotation for years. So it would hurt. To your point, it wouldn't kill him. So you can see Dipoto maybe pulling the trigger. He is a gambler. So I could see it. And one side note, a lot of people think Emerson Hancock has a lot of value. He doesn't. It's another one of these Nate Pearson things where it's probably going to be a reliever. Poor guy cannot stay healthy. He's had a lot of shoulder trouble. So he's only in the single digits. So let's not think about that one. So after, if they wipe out those guys, then your best prospect is like Edwin Arroyo at 20. So it would put a big dent in the farm, but I can see him doing it.
Yeah, I think they would be intriguing. Another thing is too, I feel like with the money, I feel like they would be willing to possibly sign him. They've been giving out some contracts. The question would be, is if you sign Soto now to a huge deal, when Julio Rodriguez comes up, you got to be thinking, man, the way this guy is playing, and he can end up getting himself a nice juicy contract at some point down the road.
Yeah, and there's also this strategy aspect. Like the Mariners have been dying to make the playoffs since 2005? I know 19. I don't know how long it's been. 2001.
2001. Yeah, when they had the record for wins.
Right. So it's been 21 years. That fan base it's been long suffering. And so they want to get over that hump, right? So maybe this is the move that says, okay, guys, this is it. We're all in. I can see it, but it's going to hurt.
Yeah. Well, all right. For the next one here, I'm rather excited about this next one. Here we go. Why am I excited about the next one? Because, it involves my Red Sox. And John, I have an interesting proposal for you. I've been talking about this, and I'm wondering here, and this I might be talking crazy here, but, and I don't know if the Nationals would even do this. I don't know, but I'm thinking of the guy that I think about is Rafael Devers. That's another guy, same situation here where they're having trouble coming to an agreement on an extension. They're far apart on that. Rafael Devers is actually closer to free agency, but the one thing that he does do in a trade would be to close the gap in terms of value. And with the Nationals, if they're not willing to pay Juan Soto that much money, maybe they're more willing to pay Rafael Devers. He would be cheaper, obviously. So I feel like you could include Rafael Devers, but this is where I hold back. The Red Sox have been working towards rebuilding their farm, so I most likely see it probably not happening. It doesn't feel like a Chaim Bloom kind of a move. Maybe if Dave Dombrowski was here, then that's possible. But I don't see Chaim Bloom doing it. While it is fun to get these ideas in my head, the Rafael Devers thing, I actually do wonder if we were to, I'll segue into that in a second, but what do you think about the Red Sox? I'm guessing you're probably thinking the same.
No, It's just not Heim Bloom. I mean, he was brought in to be the anti-Dombrowski. He was brought in
Yeah.
to build a sustainable model, right? So that
Right.
they don't have to overpay for all the contracts, right? So,
Mhm.
and he's done that. He's got, and they got a little bit lucky with the pick last year with Mayer. So, and he's great. He's, is at 57. He's their top prospect. Casas is at 39, and Bayo is at 28, and York is at 20. So they got some pieces there. It definitely hurt them. So let's say they took on the Corbin contract and they did not trade Devers, because I don't think isn't that like, cutting off your nose to spite your face? Like, why would you,
Yeah.
So then you'd be wiping out your top 4 or 5 guys from your farm, which you just built.
I don't see it. But here's my segue. I wonder, I've been speculating in my head here. I wonder if the Red Sox maybe start looking at Rafael Devers trades. I wonder, just because they're not close on an extension. Now, maybe they are close and we just don't know about it. But if they're not, this guy is a free agent after next year. He's got a good amount of value right now. I believe right around 60, unless there's been an update. The last time I looked was at 60.
Yeah.
And the way the Red Sox are playing right now, I mean, I don't know. I'm actually starting to wonder. Everyone's talking about Bogarts, but I'm like, well, hold on a second. I mean, why not Devers? I don't know. I'm just speculating. But what do you think about Devers? Do you feel like he could end up maybe being a candidate, or am I just being crazy?
Well, how far? So let me take a look. Does he have a year and a half of control left?
He's a free agent after next year.
Okay, so then you're right to bring it up, because it's going to be an issue. I know they've tried to extend him, right, and it hasn't quite worked out. If I'm not, well, you tell me, you're the expert. But yeah, since he doesn't have a deal yet, he's at 60, so you've got some trade value now. And it all kind of boils down to whether you think you can extend him or not. And if you can't, then you got another Mookie situation, sort of a mini Mookie situation. He's not Mookie, but he's up there. So, and he's 25, so he's still young. So that's going to cost you. And he's close enough to free agency now where he's going to want retail as well. He's going to want the big payday. So if you had Soto and Devers, I mean, I know the Red Sox have money, but oh my God, that's quite a hit to the pocketbook. And they extended both of them. You're talking about like a $500 million deal and like a $400 million deal.
That's definitely not Heim Bloom. I know that's definitely Now the thing with Mookie, I remember back in 2019. I don't remember any Mookie trade talk at that deadline. So they did trade him the offseason prior. Before he was going to hit free agency. So I definitely could see the Red Sox waiting until the offseason. But then again, I mean, they were almost in kind of I don't remember what their record was at the deadline a couple of years ago or back in 2019, but I feel like it was probably not far off from where they are now. So I could definitely see them hanging on to Devers. But
yeah, I mean, the other thing is, if you're going to compete next year, if you're going to trade for Soto and wipe out your farm, it means you're going all in. So why would you trade Devers at that point? Why you're going to need him, right?
Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking in terms of Bloom here, where it's like, he wants to, start maybe looking towards, the future a lot here. So maybe unload Devers of it. I would think if the right deal comes across, then I don't think he turns it down. So
yeah, I mean, I think those are two separate points. I think if they decide this is not their year, then you can make a case for trading Devers and stocking the farm more and just punt till 20, see what happens next year. 2020, line it up so that your talent is hitting at the right time a couple of years from now, maybe. And that's a Bloom thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But if you still think you're contending, and then you go all in, and that's the only way a Soto trade makes sense if you're going
right. Absolutely. Well, let's move on here. I believe there's one more team left on this list. The St. Louis. No, there's a couple of teams. We got the Cardinals and the Giants. Let's quickly talk about the Cardinals. The Cardinals, to me, I think are really interesting, just because it doesn't. So I mentioned this in the video the other day when I was going over possible trade proposals. With the Athletic, I said in that video, it's not really their style. They have made big trades with Nolan Arenado, Goldschmidt, but they've never made a move of this magnitude where someone like for Miguel Cabrera or A-Rod, so this would be new waters for them. They have made big trades before, but not to this level. And they've never really signed a guy to a massive contract before, because that's what I'm also thinking of in my head. When you trade for Soto, you're probably going to want to try and extend him too. So I don't know if this is really the Cardinals' way when you look at those two aspects, but they got pieces here where, I mean, it would kind of wreck the top of their farm, but they could do it. And you got a young outfielder and someone like Dylan Carlson too. So what do you feel about the Cardinals?
I have a sneaky feeling that they're the most likely team to do this. Now, to your first point, you recall a couple of years ago when Stanton was on the market and it came down and he had a no trade clause, and
that as well
came down to 3.
Yes,
the Cardinals were right there. They were ready to take on Stanton's contract.
So maybe this is their backup plan.
You could be. I mean, you'd have to trade, Jordan Walker. A couple of their guys have really, really stepped up this year. Mason Wynn, Graceffo, Alec Burlson. I mean, Team Kent's even. And so you've got like some pieces there. You could make it work. You could take on Corbin's contract and you get the 120 with Walker's at 61, Wynn's at 25. So that's 86. Graceffo's close to 20. That's 106. One or ish more guys, then you're there. And now it does wipe out the top of their farm. But they are the Cardinals and they like to develop homegrown players, and they have kind of that Dodger thing where they just sort of next man up. So
just find a way to get it done.
You can kind of make a case here that this is doable.
Yeah. It feels like it's barely doable, but it's doable and it makes sense. So it almost feels like, I look at it as like, remember on the DVDs when it was on the screen where it was like the screensaver, you have the DVD that would bounce around. It almost fits perfectly just into that corner. You know what I mean? Where it just makes it, but it can do it. So,
and one more point here, Jordan Walker is blocked by Arenado. He's a third baseman. A lot of scouts think he's going to end up at first, and there he's blocked by Goldschmidt. So it's your top prospect is worth 61.6, and he's blocked. So okay, that's an obvious candidate. Alec Burlson is also a first baseman. He's worth 20, and he's blocked by Goldschmidt too. So
I'm telling you,
I think it through and think, okay, this kind of makes sense.
I want this to happen because I think I'm the only guy out there that picked the Cardinals to win the World Series this year.
Yeah.
So Cardinals, I don't know if you're listening to this right now, but please make it happen so you can help my prediction come true, please. And then everyone will know that I'm the only one that picked the Cardinals. Here we go. Let's move on to the Giants. One more team here, and then we're going to start to wrap things up. But the Giants are interesting. Hey, had Barry Bonds at one point. This could be the next Barry Bonds for them.
Yeah.
I don't know if they quite have. They do got some pieces at the top, but I don't know if they quite have enough to maybe get it done. And also, I don't know. It just feels like the way things are right now. I don't know. It doesn't maybe feel like it's something that they would do. You do have guys like Luciano and Harrison that definitely close the gap if they took on Corbin. Where with Corbin, maybe, and with the Giants, they have kind of gotten guys turned around, and maybe that could be a nice fresh start for Patrick Corbin somewhere. And they are pretty close. If you have to include Harrison and Luciano, and then you got guys like Matos, so they could get a deal done. So, is it their style though? Like, do you think that's something that they would do?
Yeah, it's a stretch for me because Farhan Zaidi is all about sustainability, right? And creativity, and he doesn't like to give up his best prospects because his team is frankly pretty old, and you're starting to see it now because they lost Posey. Crawford had a good year last year, but he's showing his age this year. Same with Belts. They've kind of been riding these horses for years, and they're kind of done. So they need a kind of injection of youth, and why would you wipe out your youth for one guy?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say let's do a top 3 before we get out of here. Let's go top 3 teams. I would say for me, number 3. Oh man, if I were to kind of go through all these teams, I'll go number 3, the Mariners. Who do you guys as your number 3?
Of the ones we talked about, I'm going to say the Dodgers.
Okay, all right, I like that. My number 2, I'll go Padres. Number 2.
My number 2 is the Mets. just because of the money, and but somehow they're going to make that work with the money.
Well, I think we both agree on number one. I think it's the Cardinals. I think right now
I agree.
They just make the most sense for him.
And it's weird for me to say that, because it wasn't the first thing I would have thought of. You naturally think Dodgers, Yankees, or maybe Mets, but the Cardinals. And then you start to look into it like, so okay.
They have the Cardinals, but again, they would have to part with Carlson. That would be the big piece. They would have to. You wouldn't be able to do Tyler O'Neill, Harrison Bader wouldn't be enough. Carlson would have to be the centerpiece on that.
If you did make Carlson, it would be less of a hit to your firm, assuming you're taking on Corbin.
Yeah.
And then you throw in Walker and you're done pretty much.
Yeah, you're just replacing Carlson with Soto. So
and that's not hard to do.
No, I think the Cardinals are the winners here. So we do have a couple super chats before we do get out of here. First one is from Nick, and this is actually not about Juan Soto. This is about Dominick Smith. Apparently, the Red Sox and the Cubs have reached out to the Mets for Dominick Smith. Would the Red Sox trade JD Martinez? You think? Only guy I can see it for. The only reason I can think JD Martinez could maybe go somewhere again is, do the Red Sox feel like they're going to compete?
Right.
I wouldn't doubt it. I think Bloom is going to be out there. I've seen a lot of articles going into the break. The Red Sox, should they sell? Should they sell? I think they're going to be, if they're in this position right now, if they're like 2-3 games back, I think personally they go into a position where they're looking at everything, buying, selling, kind of just retooling. That's how I see Chaim Bloom doing things. And if you part with JD Martinez, that gets you a guy that's under control for a little while, I definitely could see it. What do you think here about Dominick Smith? He was a trade piece going into the season, possibly.
Yeah, he doesn't have much valью. He had one good year, and he's been kind of, not very productive around that, and including this year. And he's not there. We have him at 0.5, so it's not going to cost you anything.
And it sounds like it could make some sense for the Mets because they could use another bat. I think JD Martinez.
For Martinez, you mean, if you traded JD? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely.
And he has Dominick Smith doesn't have much value. JD Martinez, I think he's a little negative. I think so. Maybe.
Yeah, because the contract is.
So maybe the Mets can end up maybe paying some of that contract or whatever. I don't know. So
if it's with the Mets MO, let's just pay money for a guy. Don't have to give up anything. I can see that.
It would stink to lose him because I've loved JD, but. Thank you, Nick. Do appreciate it. One of our Mets fans here in the chat. He makes sure to let me know every day that the Mets are going to win the World Series. He finds me somewhere. He'll find me on Twitter in my comments. He'll be, he'll be holding up a sign across the street. He lets me know every day that the Mets are going to win the World Series.
And and if it does happen, can I just add one more thing? If it does happen, fans who don't know anything about trade value say, "Oh man, we got JD Martinez for nothing." What? Right. They actually kicked in money to give us JD Martinez? I'm sure you're going to hear that.
I bet. Man. Conman752, one of our Orioles fans here. Is the deadline less active while the Soto sweepstakes is going on as teams wait to see what happens? Or will the deadline be unaffected with regards to how active it is? So let me read that one more time. Is the deadline less active while the sweepstakes are going on for Soto, or do you think it'll be unaffected?
I don't think it will be. I don't think it's shutting the market down. No, I think teams are putting packages together, but I don't think it's at the exclusion of all the other deals that were going to happen. Keep in mind, we're still about 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks away. This is totally normal. Yeah. I mean, this is about when things start to happen. And also keep in mind, front offices were focused on the draft, which just finished. And the All-Star game, they couldn't do anything because, baseball doesn't like to steal any thunder, so they can't do anything during the All-Star break, basically. So now is when things kick in, and now, the texting is going back and forth. And so, keep in mind, pitchers are always going to be on the move. People are going to talk Luis Castillo and the other pitchers, or relievers are going to go, So, the Soto thing doesn't affect any of that. So that's just going in its natural pace right now. So
business as usual. So teams are going to be teams knowing they're not going to go for Soto are still going to be making phone calls out there. So.
Right.
And one more before we get out of here. What if a team is not willing to take on Patrick Corbin or Strasburg? They just want to trade for Soto. How would that work? Well, you got to give up everyone in your farm.
Yep.
So,
170 million ish of prospect capital, which wipes out entire farms. Some farms don't even have that. A lot of them don't. So
I mean, I think the White Sox farm isn't even worth half
Yeah.
of Soto's value. And the
Right.
A's too. Well, maybe the A's a little bit.
No, with a little bit more, but like the Angels is pretty terrible as well. The Astros farm is pretty terrible. Like there's several teams like don't even have 100 in their top 30. So yeah, and that's just not happening.
Well, all righty. Well, I think we have talked enough Juan Soto tonight. I don't think there's any more we could talk about with Juan Soto. Absolutely huge show. It definitely shows how many people are interested in this situation. We got up to almost 600 people in the chat tonight.
Nice.
Really do appreciate it. Everyone, go on baseballtradevalues.com. Go play around the simulator. Come up with your own Juan Soto trades. Maybe there's one we're not thinking of out there. Maybe you can come up with one on your own. But everyone, thank you for all the super chats tonight. Do all really appreciate all of the support. And everyone, go have yourself a great night. And we'll talk to you next time.